Well, good morning and welcome to the subcommittee meeting. And Phil, in terms of opening Karakia, please.
Morena koutou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti he moriora.
Thank you. In terms of item 2, we can take the health and safety statement as read. Anything you want to add to that, Dave?
I'll quickly add for those of you who may not have been before. In the event of an emergency, please follow the directions of staff who will know what to do and will tell you the appropriate actions to take. In brief, the emergency exit out of the building is through that door and to the right. In the event of some unforeseen circumstance happening at reception or something like that, you may be asked to go into the councillors' lounge via this way. But we're not expecting any of that. So have a good day.
But I share your confidence. Just before I go to apologies, though, I'd just like to extend a warm welcome to Shannon. You are the disability sector representative, I understand. So welcome to the subcommittee. And also next door, Carolyn, welcome in terms of Kawa Atua representative. So, now, apologies, Dave. Got Andy Baker for early departure, and we've got Deputy Mayor Angela, Shane, and Chair Pamela. Okay. Have someone to move and second that. Thanks, Angela. Second by Liz. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. The confirmation of the agenda is there are no proposed changes to that apart from a highlighted matter. Okay, Dave.
Okay. Pursuant to standing orders, we are able to insert minor matters that are not on the published agenda, and we have done so being a discussion on bus capacity at school travel times. One thing to note with this is that while the item is tabled for discussion, there will be no resolutions or decisions made on the back of that, but a further report may be tabled at a subsequent meeting should the committee desire it.
Any discussion on that matter? Okay, so it's been moved that we confirm the agenda subject to those two matters, 1 and 2. I have a seconder for that. Thanks, Eugene. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest in respect of matters on the agenda? There are not. There have been no requests for public forum appearances. Is anyone here wishing to present in the public forum? No. Okay, we'll move to confirmation or receipt of minutes. And I was going to take these as a bundle. So on page 8, we've got future-proof PT subcommittee from our February meeting. And there's also an extract in terms of the Regional Transport Committee on page 13. I can have someone to move and second the receipt of both of those sets of minutes. Okay, thanks, Mayor Adrian. Have a seconder for that. You're checking you. Seconded by Sarah. Any discussion on those matters, on those two lots of minutes? There's not. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we'll move to item 8.1, the Director's Report. I'd just like to make a comment at this point. We have a reasonably full agenda. Obviously, I'm keen that we're all done and dusted by 1 o'clock at the latest. There are other future-proof meetings that some people are involved in after that meeting. So really want to keep things moving, and I'll make some comment about presentations when we get to the first one at 8.3. So on page 21, there's a report in terms of the Director's Report. Phil, anything you'd like to add or highlight?
Ideally, I'd like to take the report as read. I'm happy to take you through each of the key topics quickly, if that's of help.
Yes, yep.
So the first one is the Regional Land Transport Plan. This is a process that is led via the Regional Transport Committee, and an update on the process that's being followed with that work is provided in the report. In summary, it's on track. We had hearings on the 22nd of April. Deliberations are planned for the 13th of May, and those dates have adjusted slightly to take account of the late release of the government policy statement on the 4th of March, and then the State Highway Investment Proposal, which followed on the 12th of April. We're on track, and that document will look to be supported by the Regional Transport Committee on the 21st of June and go to Regional Council for approval on the 25th of July. And the next item is the consultation that's being led by the Regional Council on some adjustments to how rates are collected for public transport services across the region. The long-term plan, which closed yesterday, was seeking submissions on interest in the Regional Council moving to collect those rates rather than, in some cases, district councils. And that question was asked, followed by two options for consideration around two potential approaches. We have received a lot of submissions on that point, and that's going into our hearings process the week after next, and will be considered through that process. Next up is the government policy statement on land transport, and there's a paper on that topic, so I won't touch on that at this point. And then there was a question posed at a previous meeting around overview of the level of inquiries or / complaints that are received by both the Regional Council and by operators. And we've investigated the questions that were asked at that February meeting and have resolved those topics. There's a follow-up suggestion, and I'm just keen to get a high level of interest from the committee as to whether you'd like us to be reporting more around the levels of inquiries and that sort of thing that we get via the operations report in future meetings. Just a nod or shake would be helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. No, that's fine. Perhaps we can just deal with that matter first. So Phil's posed the question, or in terms of whether you want some of that detail. Angela, you look poised to.
Yeah. Yeah, I would see a lot of value in seeing themes, trends of feedback, maybe rather instead of complaints. Might be a more positive way to term it. Yeah, I think it's really valuable to hear from the users, what their experiences, and how we can make any positive changes so that people do have a positive experience. It could also inform, investment moving forward as well, be that services or infrastructure. So, yeah, I think it's highly valuable. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone disagree with that? No? I think you've got a message on that, Phil.
Thanks very much.
Is there any other questions or comments in terms of Phil's report? Eugene.
Thanks, Chair. Just around the regional rating review, WDC will be submitting on that, because both options actually are extremely unaffordable for our communities, where some people in the lower socioeconomic households are going to be stung with anything from $500 to $800 just for PT. So on those things, so we'll probably be suggesting a bit of a pause, or how we can work together on doing that to make it a more of a fairer spread. And we currently rate for PT, and the model we use is not broken, but we totally support regional collecting everybody's rates on that. So how we can work together, I think we've got time to be able to do that. So it's for a WRC submission, but I just thought I'd mention it, seeing it's on here. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. Some early heads up. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, just on that issue, so I'd heard that I'd heard there was feedback around those some significant increases for some ratepayers, and was there? I recall there was another option investigated where it was more like a whole district wide rather than the beneficiary pays model where it's within 5 kilometres or the 800. Would that be another way of approaching rating?
There are a whole range of options that can be considered. The two that went forward into the long-term plan came from a long list into a short list conversation that went through our council as part of the development of the long-term plan. And we are not proposing any changes would occur until year 2 of the long-term plan, in order for there to be further work undertaken, if there is support for that to continue. So there's an opportunity to have another look at that in the round as part of any move forward from that point. And that would all go through our annual plan process for the 2025-2026 financial year. So there's plenty of opportunity there to talk about all of those topics.
Right. Okay. So it would be locked in financially, but the way that it into your long-term plan, but the way that it's rolled out, there's still flexibility to look at that. Is that what you're saying?
So the decision that council would look to make as part of their long-term plan is to proceed or to not proceed.
Right.
And then their second resolution would be around what they would like staff to do from that point.
Right.
So they will look at all of the submissions and think about all of the feedback and make some calls around what they would like us to do over that period of time before the annual plan process kicks off later in 2024.
Okay, cool. I mean, our council is supportive of the change to the rating system generally, but we haven't seen the detail in terms of specific districts.
Liz?
Yeah.
Sarah, can you?
Just following on from that, I think we're seeing a theme come through around this table. Can I suggest that this just remains on the agenda, that particular item that we keep on this agenda, so that we can continue to receive updates on it?
Yeah, that's noted by Phil. Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor Adrian.
Yeah, it is an interesting one, isn't it? The way it's been sort of portrayed, and I guess we all look at it as it being community good, but the community good only goes to the people that are paying within the, when you talk about the rating of rural roads where a bus will travel along but doesn't stop. So yeah, it's a fascinating piece of work, but you've got to start somewhere. Find something. Nothing's ever fair or equal, it's the old equity thing. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how that progresses. It'll be good to be updated. Yeah, thank you.
If there's nothing further, there's a recommendation to receive the director's report on page 21, moved by Eugene, seconded by Angela. Any further commentary? Otherwise, I'll put that. All those in favour of receipt? Aye. Against? Carried. Oh, yes. Yeah. So on the screen, thanks Dave for reminding me, there are 4 suggested actions there. in terms of some further work and provision of information. And you can, that's why I was looking at you.
I think the first three possibly overlap a bit. But the intent is essentially to be able to understand how we can move from just doing low cost, low risk projects, particularly for Hamilton, we're really struggling to get past that to be able to do any significant projects. So one of those is, for example, the University Link, which would essentially see bus priority going along Clyde Street. And we've started that business case work a good 4 years back or something, and we still 3 years back, but we still haven't got the business case over the line, and then we're kind of missing opportunities to at least apply for funding. So the idea is to try over the next couple of years to get an agreed priority or priority projects that are outside of low cost, low risk, construction ready, so that we are ready to go when any funding opportunities do arise. And the idea would be, I guess, so it's kind of leaving it flexible though for staff to come back on their views around what a pathway forward would be and what the priority project or projects could potentially be as well. Hopefully that's a good explanation. Okay. The last one is just asking for an update around the the transition to the zero emission bus fleet, because I was asking some questions around it. It's Waipa's got a head start, but we're keen to understand, just where progress is at for the rest of the region.
Thank you.
So we're working actively on that. We're required to undertake that work as part of the contract renewal process, which we're just kicking off now. And I've got an update for you later on in the day on that. That work needs to be done as part of stage one of our processing. So we are actively on that work now, and the information I'll present to you later talks about how we look to engage the subcommittee on that work.
So what I was going to suggest, so my advice in terms of these matters being beyond the direct scope of the terms of reference of this committee. So I'm not suggesting that we resolve on them per se, but they would be noted in the minutes, and then as part of any reporting back, either to this committee or other committees or forums, that these matters would be picked up through that process. But we'll certainly note them in the. Any further discussion on those? Okay, no, thanks, Sarah. We will now move to item 8.2, the government policy statement in terms of the GPS. And there's a report commencing on page 24. And the submissions are attached. And Julie, welcome. So if you can just highlight any particular matters, given that we've report will be taken as read together with the submissions that are attached to it.
Good, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, committee. I'm Julie Hanson.
Can you just pull the microphone a bit closer, thanks?
I'm Julie Hanson, Senior Policy Advisor, and I'm here on behalf of Nigel King, our team leader. Today, he couldn't be with us, so I have read through his report and the submissions, and I guess the main thing is that the GPS has a different focus under this new government, and we've responded to that via a future-proof submission from this committee, the Regional Transport Committee and the Waikato Regional Council, each having a slightly different focus. So yes, if you're happy to, you can take the report as read and the submissions. And I guess one thing to note is that we understand that the final GPS will be released by the Ministry of Transport in July. So, thank you.
Okay, no, thanks, Julie. Open it up for comments or questions. Sarah, were you?
Oh, no, sorry.
It's fine. Angela.
Yeah, just to say a big thank you to yeah, Julie, you and your team, Nigel's team. Yeah, for the amount of work. Yeah, I know that the submissions were coming thick and fast in the last couple of months, and the quality of the submissions was fantastic, and the consistency of what we're saying in all of them, and especially for the future-proof area is a common voice, I will say.
Yes, and could I just add to that, I suspect that some of the other high growth regions would have had the same approach as well. We understand from our national conversations. So, yeah, great, thank you.
And I think just reiterating Angela's point about that commonality of and joining up of the messaging is key going forward. Any other comments or questions on these submissions? So on page 24, there's a recommendation to receive the report and receipt of those submissions. If I can have someone to move and second that, please. Moved by Angela, seconded by, sorry, Maxine. Yeah. If there's nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we'll move to item 8.3, the Cambridge connections, and that report commences on page 52. Attached to that is a extensive presentation. I'd just like to make the comment, Brian, given the presentation's been pre-circulated, it's really just highlighting any particular matters in that. So because members have had an opportunity to go through that. Otherwise, welcome, and over to you in terms of highlighting any key matters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, certainly I intend to speed through the presentation. So I guess you're all familiar with the future-proof transport business case for the sub-region, which talks about, growing population, growing traffic congestion issues, and the need to come up with different transport solutions. And so Cambridge is an example of that region-wide sort of work, but on a town base. So if we just put up the first slide there, or it changes to the first slide. So that's our vision there to shape Cambridge's transport services and infrastructure for the future, for growth, and carry on with the next slide. So Cambridge's population will almost double by 2051. A lot more cars, more congestion. So next slide. Most people around the table will be familiar with the town of Cambridge, and those blue areas are the areas where growth is occurring now, and the yellow areas where it will occur after 2035, although we have developers knocking on the door to bring forward some of those yellow areas as well. So you see it's a very substantial change to the size of Cambridge. And of course, there's a lot of infill happening within the town as well. Next slide, please. So I've touched on that car dependency and congestion, but Cambridge, unlike a city the size of Hamilton, it has a limited number of main arterial routes. Hamilton's got multiple north-south routes and east-west routes. Cambridge basically has one up the middle, Shakespeare Street and Victoria Street, and a little bit of east-west on Hamilton Road. So all of our eggs are in one basket in terms of shifting freight and large volumes of traffic, and including our bridges across the Waikato River. Next slide, please. So that Victoria Street Bridge, which many of you will know, you always feel a bit nervous when you drive onto it because it's so narrow. It's 117 years old now. It's less reliable than it was. Weight restriction, although we still get trucks and buses try and cross it occasionally. Caravans, camper vans, that's right. So around that 28,000 crossing the two bridges today, and of course you just can't get any more over the Victoria Street Bridge in peak hours. But also on our network, we have a lot of single lane roundabouts, which were fine 20 and 30 years ago, but now they're a problem because the flows are unbalanced in the peak hours and we get big queues building, and that's only going to get worse for Cambridge. Also, just like Hamilton, 30 or 40 years ago when State Highway 1 went up Victoria Street past the post office, we do have all that heavy commuter flow running right through the middle of our main street as well. So next slide, please. So those constraints, we know, more people are walking and cycling, but the infrastructure is undeveloped. We're trying to do something about that. Again, our bus use is growing well, but the majority of our bus stops in our town are just a sign and markings. So no shelters, no accessible curbs and things like that. So it's quite undeveloped. We do celebrate the start of our electric bus fleet, which is brilliant. I rode over on it this morning. It's very smooth, much quieter. The drivers seem to love it. So I'm sure it's going to grow in use. Next slide, please. So those are the broad benefits of investing. There's no surprises there. Improving amenity, accessibility, system resilience, safety, and reducing greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. So we came up with a short list of options for change. Next slide, please. There is the business as usual, which we compare against, carrying on to maintain that bridge. The last repaint and repair cost $4 million that we've just finished. Next slide, please. So option A is kind of the option that everybody jumps to in the community often. It's, well, I still want to drive my car. Let's make the roads bigger, the intersections bigger. Let's have another bridge. Ooh, let's put it out in the countryside where nobody will notice it. But the modelling shows that if we do that, everybody's going to want to use the bridges in town, and we would need to effectively duplicate the Shakespeare Street Bridge as well to cope with the volume of traffic. Next slide, please. So another option is to really work hard on walking and cycling bus services. A lot of Cambridge is perfectly flat. It's a relatively compact town. It's a really easy town to get around walking and cycling. So aiming for mode shift, but also needing to do quite a lot of work to those main roads to make them suitable for the increasing volumes of traffic, so to optimise their use. And build another bridge somewhere in town when the Victoria Street Bridge ultimately needs to have less traffic on it or no traffic on it, and maybe just keep it for walking and cycling. Next slide, please. Option C is option B on steroids, with trying to get even more onto buses, walking and cycling. So, more investment in those modes. Next slide, please. So I'll flick through these very quickly. So the next slide. So some Bluetooth monitoring, albeit it was in the red setting of COVID in 2022, but a lot of the trips from the south side in the morning are all coming into the town for shopping and school trips and recreation and things like that, employment. And that is backed up by traffic modelling and census data that a lot of the travel across the bridges is within the town. Next slide, please. In 2055, the next 2 or 3 slides show that we expect a lot of congestion on those main routes. Next slide, please. And the next as well. So what would happen if the Victoria Street Bridge was to close? And we do have to close it sometimes because something goes wrong. A big vehicle drives onto it and smashes the rails and things like that. We know that the town would not cope with just a single bridge, so we need to do something. Next slide, please. People have asked us if you built some extra ramps at Tirau Road to get onto the expressway, what would happen? A relatively small volume of traffic would make that trip in that direction to get on the expressway because it's quite a bit longer. And they would be ultimately just trying to avoid congestion through the town. So you might build some ramps out there, but you're still going to have a congestion problem in town to deal with. Next slide, please. And if we built a bridge somewhere in the town, we would, effectively be keeping those flows balanced between the two bridges across the river. Next slide, please. And if we built a bridge out of town, you can see that a lot more traffic would still go to the Shakespeare Street Bridge because that's most convenient. And so we would need to duplicate those. Next slide, please. So what next? Carry on with the slide, please. So we've come quite a way through the business case, developing a strategic case and options. We anticipate by July to have finished the business case. We're in a bit of a public consultation phase at the moment, and there has been a lot of heat in terms of certainly elements of the residents have been captured by the idea of where should a bridge be, and so a lot of the debate and discussion has all been around that, as opposed to the bigger picture of how do you deal with a growing town. And that's understandable. Those big decisions are difficult to make and they do have wide-ranging impacts. So we've, I guess, paused that development of bridge options until we can spend more time in the detail and more time with the community telling the story and getting that good consultation and feedback. But there's other elements of the business case that we can continue to proceed with. Next slide, please. So what have we learned? Next slide. Just in summary, that rapid population is going to cause congestion and pressures. Our main streets, river crossings will need to change to accommodate that. Walking and cycling and bus uptake will certainly play a valuable part, but there will be some expensive road infrastructure required too. Next slide, please. And what we need to know, how long will the Victoria Bridge be suitable to keep open to traffic? We think at least 20 years, probably longer if we keep throwing bucket loads of money at it. Well, buckets are probably not big enough, more than that. Getting people and freight through the town, we're going to have to optimise how those main roads work. I don't think there's any appetite in Cambridge to knock down all the trees and have 4-lane roads. So we're going to have to find ways to get traffic through. There are costs and impacts, and we're going to have to tell the story and bring our community with us as we develop the detail of that. I think that's the last slide. If we just check. Yes, that is. So if you've got any questions on that, be happy to take them.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'll open it up for any questions or comments from members.
I'll go first. Thank you, Brian. In fact, look, great presentation. Hopefully it gives everybody here a snapshot about what Cambridge is up to. I think it's probably fair to say there's been a huge amount of work that our council and the staff have been doing in this space. Aligns with our 30-year Aki strategy and really looking at the long-term plan for Cambridge, which is growing. You drive into that town, it's barely recognisable of where it was 15 years ago. When I look at this presentation, of course, there's a lot of mode shift required. And we're doing our bit in this space. So we have put a huge amount of effort into building separate cycleways, separate walking spaces, so we can get our children to school safely and get people across from Leamington to Cambridge using kind of, bikes and hopefully getting people out of cars, which is really what we're hoping to do. So I really feel like we're doing our bit here, but the real question is, what else do we need to do? And more importantly, how can this group help? So for us, the public transport place is still something that needs a lot of thought. We've had great success in increasing our Cambridge to Hamilton bus service, and we've heard a little bit about that. But what we still don't have, of course, is an internal public transport system to get our people around Cambridge successfully. So I know I've spoken about this before, but it would be really great to just make sure we keep that on the radar. I'm hoping there's still an opportunity to utilise the minibuses that are coming out of the airport, that we can maybe look at an internal on-demand system for Cambridge. essentially, you know, this is an opportunity to design a town before it gets congested and before we end up with big city issues that we can't fix. So we're really putting a huge amount of effort in our long-term planning now, but there's only so much we can do. So some support around more public transport options, I think, would be really great.
Thanks, Liz. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really enlightening to see visually where you're up to on that journey. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'd just like to yeah, agree with Liz about you know, solutions moving forward. Liz has spoken passionately on a number of times about yeah, getting an internal service going, especially highlighting the ageing population out there as well. The commuter between Cambridge and Hamilton as well sorted now. But I was just a question maybe for our staff, for you as well. What's the process for getting that kicked off, or where are we at with looking at an internal service within Cambridge?
Phil.
So there are several parts to the answer to that. One is in the context of the renewal of all of our bus contracts, we need to go through a process of doing reviews of our networks, and that work is commencing now. That will identify areas where we can make short-term improvements immediately, and also sets out a plan for investment over the term of the next contract period. And I think that's the place where these ideas, these opportunities need to be tested and included. That process is occurring over the next 12 months or so, and that's the time for us to build in those requirements, which have to go through a whole range of approval processes ahead of tendering. But the shape, the function, the role of our public transport networks across the whole region is up for debate as part of that process. So I think the time is right for us to think of that through.
We're certainly up for a trial as well. I think that there's been a number of trials that have occurred around the country. So, you know, if that was an opportunity before anything was set in stone, that may be an opportunity for Cambridge as well.
Thanks. Angela, then Eugene.
Yeah, just following on for that, I suppose that, you know, we always know that funding is an issue, and especially with the current GPS in essence making less of a bucket for PT. Yeah, just probably a quick question around, you know, the NLTF is being set for the next 3 years. So what are the funding challenges, opportunities that this sort of thing might throw up?
So you're quite right that the updated government policy statement that came out identified nationally a reduced total pot for public transport services. And we have, in effect, two sets of applications in that process at the moment. The first is what is described as our continuous program, which is the services that exist today, with the capacity to morph and evolve those within existing budgets. And the second is a list of new ideas, new trials, concepts and service enhancements that were included within the low cost, low risk program for us. And both of those are in the process of being considered by the agency, and I suspect that they will be going through a national process of assessing how they all align with what the government now wants to achieve from public transport. And we expect to hear shortly, maybe within the next month, couple of months, about where that's going. And that will help us understand what we have capacity for over the next 3 years, in effect.
Thanks, Phil. Eugene.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Angela and also Liz probably just mentioned those bits in there, but you're obviously looking at having money in your LTP, or that maybe not so much your enhanced annual plan, but the LTP for trial services. We Fortunately, or unfortunately, we missed out on some Waka Kotahi funding at the last time around, and so we had our local share, and then we needed to get some trials up and running, and we 100% subsidised that, but it allowed us to advance those trials probably well ahead of time. So yeah, like I support what you're doing. Really good report, good information there, and support your the strains that you're having around there with transport options, etc. So yeah, just get some money in there, and trials are a great thing.
Okay, I've got Sarah, Mayor Adrian and Jess in that order.
Thank you, Chair. I first just wanted to ask for clarity because I wasn't fully sure. So is there local share funding for some internal Cambridge service in any LTPs at the moment?
So we have, I guess, produced a public transport business case a few years ago, and we set out in our 21 to 31 LTP a steady increase in local share for passenger transport services. And the first step, which we're in now, was increasing the hours and frequency of bus services. So that's funded at the present time, but I think it was in a future year that we increased the funding again for additional services. So I don't think specifically in the next year we have local share funding for a trial.
In terms of, so I found the presentation really interesting, thank you. One question I had was, you mentioned the commute between Cambridge and Hamilton, and it was last term we were presented a bit of a study which was done around dealing with the congestion for the buses once they hit Hamilton, and then getting through that, and that severely impact the travel times for someone commuting from Cambridge to Hamilton. So I guess, would it be possible firstly to actually have that recirculated, because I tried to find it and couldn't amongst all the agendas that are floating around, but to what extent will that be linked into the thinking with Cambridge Connections?
So it's probably a two-pronged answer there. There'll be a bit of a regional council answer and a Waipa answer. So certainly for that bus trip from Cambridge to Hamilton, whether that's school students going to school or university or workers going to work, if the bus trip takes an hour but a car trip takes 30 minutes, then yes, there's certainly an incentive for people to take their cars. So when my staff participated in that study for how do you get through Hamilton, or how do you make that trip more reliable, I guess we're pushing for solutions there, but we are kind of not the road controlling authority or the manager of the bus route setting within the city. So I guess you've got strong support from Waipa for that service to be made more efficient, and we'll continue to work with you to see that happens. So.
Phil.
Thank you.
The other half to the answer is that work was presented to the Regional Community Connections Committee back in the last triennium, middle of 2022, I believe. So we could easily find that for you to circulate. A lot of the work is now included within the PT Pathways investigation, which is just launching now as a project under the Metro Spatial plan. So a lot of this topic will be reconsidered over the next 6 months.
Okay, so last two questions, Mayor Adrian, then Jess.
I think the thing is that it's more of a comment around like, well, what is the population now of Cambridge, the township? Have you got a, because it's grown rapidly, we know that.
So it's about 20,000 within the urban boundaries, but obviously there's quite a large population that are just on the fringes. There's a lot of rural residential and a lot of, so there certainly has been a lot of growth, and you think of Karapiro along Mangatautri, the lake edge, Te Mero, there's a lot of rural residential out in those areas now that call the Cambridge Town Centre, their centre.
Mm. Which is quite fascinating with the growth going forward, because those rural residential, I presume, because they're in high productive soils, will be curtailed. Those that are there now, and there won't be a lot more, I don't think. It will be difficult to do that. I guess I guess one of the questions I have is, who's the target audience for the bus? Is it people going to work? Is it retired people going into town? What is the, I guess it's all of the above when kids go to school. Yeah, so that's quite a mixed thing to try and to know what the demand is, because if people don't demand it, they might not use it. So yeah, it's quite a fascinating. Yeah, you go for it, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, the trial that was done successfully in Oamaru provides really good information now, I believe. But also, I think the on-demand trial that's been occurring in Hamilton City, again, all that data definitely does look to explain that probably I think Cambridge would be a success story. So perhaps that information can be collated. I really watched with interest that trial in Oamaru. Was it Oamaru or Timaru? One of the two. Timaru. Okay. Anyway, so look, it's definitely worth exploring for a town that's growing the size that, and it will continue, because our growth in the CBD is yeah, we've got another 5,000 houses to go on yet. So that's all been developed. So look, I think, yeah, I'd just rather continue to move in the right direction. And yes, we absolutely appreciate that there will need to be our local share funding. But what we do need is just a bit of I guess a heads up, a clue that, regional council are behind us in this space, and looking to include us as well in future planning.
Okay, I've got Jess, then Maxine.
Yeah, I guess my point, I'm just continuing my role as bad news bearer, is just to remind you that the continuous programs are probably going to be reduced, this NLTP, not enhanced. So when we are looking at trials and new services, there is going to be extraordinarily limited money for anything new. And in fact, we will be looking at reducing what we've got. So I think we need to be really clear on prioritisation of what we put forward. That's not to diminish. I want to emphasise what a fantastic job Brian and the team have done on Cambridge Connections. But every time I hear new stuff, I just feel the need to kind of flag it's going to be quite a different 3 years with the direction set in the DPS and what the board has been asked to do around PT funding.
Thanks, Jess. I'm glad I don't have your job. No. Maxine.
Thank you. I back up those sentiments, actually. Ours is hard enough. That's supplementary to Sarah's inquiry regarding the boundary between Cambridge, Hamilton, and some of the travel times that you've talked about, car v bus. Other solutions that might be available in the interim, is that being considered at all in terms of potentially park and ride, or any other kind of share kind of situations where we can move people part way in a car and then hook up to the local system?
So I think that idea of park and ride, it's obviously been explored a bit in the larger business case for the sub-region. I think it'll be explored to a degree in the PT pathways work that Phil's mentioned, in terms of, well, how do you optimise? But I guess for a short travel distance, it's difficult enough to get people to, change buses along a route if it's a short distance, let alone get them to drive to a car park and get on a bus and then maybe need to change to another bus. So I guess the more steps we put in the journey, the harder it becomes for people to move to public transport. So I guess my hope would be that we could keep a relatively direct bus route between Cambridge and Hamilton.
Thank you. Any comment, Phil, in terms of the PT pathways portion of that? Thank you.
Okay, there's no further questions. I'd just like to, and I think picking up your earlier point, Liz, in terms of on-demand trials, etc. I just checked with Phil, so that's part of the mix in terms of the work that he outlined earlier. If there's nothing further, if I can take you to page 52, and there's a recommendation to receive the Cambridge Connections report. I can have a mover and seconder for that, please. Thanks, Eugene. Seconded by Mayor Adrian. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And and thanks, Brian, in terms of the presentation. Really helpful. Okay, we'll now move to item 8.4 and the Huia Interim Performance Assessment, and that was the addendum part of the agenda that was sent out. And Phil, if you can take us through that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just firstly recommend that we take the report as read. Just a couple of things I'd like to take the committee through before we open up for discussion. But I will be joined in the answers by James, who's joined me from the back seats there. So just quickly through the first couple of slides, please, Dave. Sorry. So the performance assessment was a requirement of an NZTA funding condition in 2019. The trial period, or the review period, was 2022 and 2023, and we completed the review earlier this year. The report, as you will have seen, states that the trial is delivering, close to delivering, or is on track to deliver all of the targets and benefits within the full 5-year period. Next slide, please. The report also states that the agency board is meeting later in May to receive and consider the interim performance assessment. As you know, we have funding currently in place until the 30th of June, subject to that board consideration. And alongside the Crown share, there is also a need for council to go through the long-term plan process, which is, as we've already talked about, underway over the next few weeks and months. Just next slide, please. Just the report is focused on the time period from January 2022 to December 2023, and there have been several things that have happened in 2024 that I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention. Firstly, we introduced some new services in early February. We added a new return on a Thursday and a Friday, and a new return on a Saturday. We also saw completion of phase 2 of the Auckland Rail Network rebuild programme, which has significantly improved on-time performance. March travel times of around 90%, as noted in the report, were much closer to the targets. Next slide, please. But the impact of both of those things has been a good increase in patronage. And the yellow line on the diagram there shows the target that was set within the 2018 single stage business case, the 2019 funding decisions, and you can see how the service has exceeded that this is the whole of 2024. In addition, the red line shows the other target that was supported by the Huia Subcommittee in middle of 2022 at a higher level, and you can see how that's now being achieved more frequently, and we're certainly far closer to achievement of that target than we were at the time that the 2-year review timeframe finished in December 23. Next slide, please. There was no change to the Saturday target, and the lines there show how that's being exceeded every single weekend. Next slide, please. The interim performance assessment identifies an action to undertake an independent review, and that would be a review of fares, fare recovery, operating costs, and ways to increase patronage. That work is underway and is due for completion over the next couple of months. We've just received some draft insights, and I thought I would just share some of those with you at a high level. So firstly, the comparison has been made to the way Capital Connection is funded and runs. And there were some interesting observations from that around how Capital Connection, next slide please, Capital Connection, on top of picking people up in Palmerston North, also has interim stations in places like Shannon, which is very similar to Huntly, but then has stops in places like Levin and Otaki, which are where we would probably have stations in the North Waikato in equivalent, and then has station stops in Waikanae and Paraparaumu and picks up people there, which neither of those second two we have for Te Huia. So the patronage increases by about a third at each of those two locations and increases the total number of people that arrive into central Wellington more than Te Huia currently has. The review's also continuing to suggest advocating for new funding sources, and that's both the opportunity for Auckland Council to participate in the funding of some of the local share contribution for Te Huia, but also whether there are opportunities to have Te Huia stopping in Auckland and then a patronage share arrangement being reached so that there's another service running in Auckland where passengers can travel and then we get the revenue and the patronage on the service. The 1st of July sees an increase in fares for the whole region, and for Te Huia that means an increase in fare from $18 to $21.60. The report, again at a draft and high level, sees that increase in fares could increase our fare box recovery from the 14% that's reported in the 2-year review to around 20-21%, all other things being equal. The work is focusing on 5 cases which are each being modelled, and there are within those cases there are fare level tests, but there are also some potential changes to if we were to charge Super Gold users at peak. If we were to make changes to the amounts that children are charged, what does that do for our overall numbers? And then just finally, we'd look to present that back to the August Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'll open it up for questions or comments from members. Eugene.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. The 5-year period, is that finished in June next year?
Nominally, it is April 2026.
April 2026, yep. And we've got funding for the service until June next year.
The funding was approved by the agency board for the 5-year trial with a hold point at a 2-year review point. So the 2-year review process is what will activate and release the funding for the final years.
And so when this goes to the board, this report goes to NZTA board, is it there where the decision's made? Yes. Yes. Okay. Yep. And so, yeah, just really make a comment now is that, you know, it gets very frustrating. And like I'm just saying this from a very neutral side, so relevant whether you're left or right political view or whether you support Te Hui or not. But, you know, when is, and I know this is not where we're going to make this thing here, but when's New Zealand going to start to have some better bipartisan agreements in central government around transport and some of the other heavy things like health, etc. This here, there's been a lot of money sunk into this project. There's not really a public passenger rail system around the world that's not subsidised to some extent. Understand that this is reasonably heavily subsidised at this stage, but you know, getting over the hurdle is what's happening now. And this particular project with Te Huia hit 2 real significant snags, which was COVID and also the AT infrastructure network, which is really, you know, you're always taking a back step all the time. Now that those things are out of the way, or AT network's improving, the service is getting better and better and better. And I really do think that hope the board actually sees, you know, has some vision and seen that there. And I know that they're probably there to try to save some dollars for elsewhere. But, you know, Hamilton City, ourselves, the future of all of this is, you know, we've invested heavily into this as Waka Kotahi have, NZTA have. I really do hope it continues because you're going to have just white elephants, you know. You'd look at Rotorua, for example, what's going to happen to their massive investment there with the transport network that HCC have done. So, Yeah, look, I just really hope this committee really gets behind and supports Te Huia, because we know if they can it, there'll be another iteration of it in another 10, 15 years' time, and it's going to cost you 4 times as much to get to where we are now. So that's just more of a comment, but yeah, I really do hope it continues.
Yeah, Adrian.
Yeah, it's always one of those things, isn't it? And when the public get hold of it and don't always have the facts to work with. So there's obviously been a few fish hooks happen over the last couple of years. So I sort of see as key things for people not using it or not regularly using it is it's not reliable for them, or, you know, the timing, the obviously being on time. So are those sort of things able to be achieved, that we can achieve a better percentage success rate in getting from A to B at the set time? Like, what are the opportunities there to nail those challenges?
We spend a lot of time in the review looking at where the delays had been on the
Which you
network,
saw that, yeah.
and in trying to understand what was causing them and what the solutions were. The reality is that when we get to Auckland, we're a part of the traffic on the line, and
Correct.
we have to travel at the same speed as traffic in Auckland. And that's one of the largest constraints. So we are not a member of the Auckland Timetable Committee, where the allocation of slots and the prioritisation of slots occurs, but we're working closely with the partners that are, to try and make sure that Te Huia gets the priority and the profile it needs as an express service into Auckland to try and get that consistency of travel time.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? It's level of service. The other thing that obviously hits the news is that it's subsidised $500 per person at the moment. So if we got it to 21%, it's not true. So this is the thing. This is the narrative, and this is the things that I hear people say. So how can we? Is there a number that I can tell people that no, that's not right? Because that's what people, this is what people get excited about in the wrong way. So can we have some, that's why I wanted to ask that question around the 500 clarity.
Yeah, those numbers are in the report.
And I've obviously missed them,
And that number includes the capital investment that was made prior to the service commencing, as opposed to the way all other public transport is calculated around the operational costs.
Yeah. So if we were to achieve 21%, that would make a significant difference. The return would make a significant difference to the subsidy, wouldn't
it? It would. The average New Zealand subsidy level is, or fare box recovery level is around 11%.
Yeah, I've got Angela, then Maxine. Okay, Maxine.
Oh, thank you. Looking at the report, and in the past, there has been significant hold-ups. Once we get across the hill into the Auckland network, and significant number of barriers that have been really difficult to be able to work through. I just wanted to have a bit of an understanding about the level of health that our relationship is with Auckland, and the partnership that we're looking to be able to build. Hamilton, our fastest growing city, connecting up with Auckland, our biggest city. And so, how can we look to get some better support in there for, a great service for not just Hamilton, but Aucklanders that are coming down in weekends, certainly, to be able to build our local economic development here. That also has equal benefits for Aucklanders coming into this area. So, give us a bit of an understanding about where that is.
The relationship with Auckland is very strong, and we are having all of those conversations, and our chair and councillors have attended and presented to Auckland Council on these topics. And we've submitted to their plans, and we've continued to submit those views on behalf of the region to Auckland. So we've been working hard to make sure that that is understood by all of the partners involved in Te Huia. And I don't know if there's more to add to that, but that definitely has been something that's been worked on hard.
And so you've also talked about the level of funding that might be helpful from Auckland to be able to support the service as well. And what's your, I guess, early understanding about where that might lie?
The regional council submitted to Auckland's long-term plan seeking a sharing of the local share component of the costs. And that is part of the considerations that Auckland Council and Auckland Transport will be having as part of their long-term plan processes. So we've advocated and submitted on that basis, and we wait to hear their decision-making process.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I've got Angela, Andy and Sarah. I was thinking of taking Andy first in terms of any commentary or questions, and then I'll come back to both of you. So Andy, welcome. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so I guess just, I mean, and just in terms of that relationship thing, I mean, one of the reasons I think I'm here and representing Auckland on this committee is to I guess be part of that conduit, but obviously the real work goes on behind the scenes. But you know, just looking at that and the comments about how it slows down over the hill, there's a couple of pieces of work that I think would be really great to have support from the southern side of the hill, if that's how we look at it. And that's the Kiwi Rail sort of capital plan for the next 30 years or whatever it is. And currently the notices of requirement work that's about to kick off for the 4 tracking to Pukekohe, and also the current 3rd tracking that's happening and should be finished in sort of the next sort of year from Key Park through to Wiri, because what that'll do is open up some options for Te Huia or Te Huia passengers, whether it's the train continuing through or whether it's the ability to have limited stops services within the Auckland network to actually open up more stops. And so it'd be good to have that sort of support when talking to Kiwi Rail and when those projects are happening, because it'll be significant for Te Huia and the people in the Waikato. We've got our budget constraints and issues, as everyone does. And when looking at the GPS, when looking at the activity classes, the PT services and infrastructure, we could suck up the whole amounts that exist potentially within those activity classes, depending on where they land, just with our needs, and that obviously isn't going to happen. So I'd suggest that anything that's coming forward from Waikato in terms of requests for funding is going to have a pretty good and robust business case alongside it. Otherwise, that's going to be a real struggle for us, because we're struggling to be able to fund what we've got. And with CRL coming online, so it's important. The sub-regional, the cross-regional stuff is really, really important. And so it's good to be here and to listen to what, this in particular. And, the independent review stuff should throw up some things that are pretty important for that cross-boundary stuff. But yeah, we've all got our challenges, and it's good to see that there is a good relationship. We've got 2 tracks at the moment. We have passenger trains running on freight lines, and that's the situation in Auckland. And so how we squeeze all that in is a real challenge. So interesting conversation, and good to be sort of on the outskirts of it.
Thanks, Andy. And I'd like to come back before we leave this item to pick up in terms of what Andy's outlined in terms of that Kiwi Rail capital plan and the notice of requirement process. So I think there are a couple of things that we need to keep a close eye on and potentially be involved there. Now, I've got Sarah and then Angela. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Andy, for your comments there. I did have one more question just around the timetable allocation in Auckland. On page 18, it notes, I guess, the difficulty that, well, notes to Huia is offered very little priority at this stage. And what can we do further in terms of assisting conversations with timetable allocation as elected members or as a committee?
My thought would be that your advocacy for Te Huia would be the place that we start those conversations. The timetable committee is a group that meets to consider all of that feedback at the time that they make those decisions, and things like the timetable for Auckland after the opening of the City Rail link are the sorts of conversations that are live in that space right now. So your support for us to continue advocating for that would be very useful.
And that's, I mean, I guess in today we're approving this report here today, but is there anything further that the committee would need to do in terms of supporting that advocacy?
If you wished to, a letter from the committee that we could use in some of those conversations would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Right, I have a few more questions. In terms of the graph that you showed up on the board earlier, Phil, around the more recent patronage numbers, you commented that patronage has increased since the works on the Auckland lines some of those have been completed, and we've had the extra return services added in. So, and that's outside of the 2-year review window, but it does show a very encouraging trend in terms of meeting the amended targets. So is that information able to be considered at all by the board in terms of, you know, extra information outside of the formal review itself?
I'm not able to confirm what the agency's decisions making would be, but we've certainly been providing this information almost daily to them. Right. They're very interested in what has occurred since new seats, new capacity was added to the network and more choice was provided to customers, and the impact that that's had on patronage.
Okay.
Did you want to comment, Jess?
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, the board can. So they're, as I say, Phil's been really closely aligned with the team, and they'll present that updated information on, I think, probably on the day, given that it's coming in live at the moment, so that the board get an appreciation of the ongoing trend since the review was completed.
Okay, thank you, Jess. And in terms of the report talks about post-trial service improvements, but I just wanted to understand a bit more about what's possible between now and the end of the trial in terms of improvements that could further boost patronage and get us consistently above those amended targets. So yeah, what's the early thinking around that? And I guess just additional to that, is there any opportunity for, you know, further stop in the North Waikato area or a Sunday service, which, given the popularity of the Saturday service, could really boost those weekend numbers?
So firstly, the consideration of budget to enhance services was a topic of lengthy conversation within the Regional Council's long-term plan process. And the budgets that are out and the consultation has just closed increased the local share contribution from year 4 of the plan, on the basis that once there was certainty about a service at the end of the trial, there was an appetite potentially for council to increase services after that time. That's all still subject to long-term plan hearings, deliberations and decisions. The interest in a new station in the North Waikato area was something that was considered through a business case process just over a year ago, and an indicative business case on North Waikato stations was produced and presented to this committee, I think, or its predecessor. That suggested that Tuakau and Pokeno were the ideal first spots for that. And there was a follow-up action for the district to continue that process through funding for a detailed business case to be considered as part of their current long-term plan or enhanced annual plan process. So that potentially is, if it is supported, would be something that the district would lead with us once those budgets are in place. Whether they would look to deliver a station within the trial period or after is unknown at this stage.
Okay, what are the minimum requirements for a station?
Each of the
like a platform. Can you just put a piece of concrete there?
So
Yeah.
Trying to summarise the work that was done.
I'm assuming not. Yeah.
The three locations that were looked at were Tuakau, Pokeno, and Te Kaupata, and the situation in each location is different in that there have been stations in those towns in the past, in some cases, and it would be a case of improving what's there. In other cases, a new from scratch facility would be required, sometimes with an overbridge and sometimes without. So the situation was different for each location, but the indicative business case was to proceed at the lowest possible cost based on a further investigation required. That's about right. Yeah. So kind of, yeah, I can't give you numbers specifically for the costs for those stations off the top of my head, but they did consider that work, and that has been reported to committee.
Thank you. I think there was one final question that was in terms of further, I guess, the investigation into potential further fare increases. How do we ensure we understand the sensitivity to fare increases and where that line may be where you end up reducing fare box recovery and patronage because it's hit a tipping point instead of increasing it?
There is definitely a demand sensitivity assessment that is needed. That work is underway, and the assessment criteria that are being used there are the same as those that we used for our assessment in the long-term plan of the overall fare changes for the Waikato region. So we've used the same basis for those assessments within this independent review that has been used within the work that the Regional Council did prior to the recommendation to change public transport fares. So it's around 10% or so reduction for a certain factor of increase.
Right.
So those are set and are being used consistently with the way that we've done other work to try and get a clarity and consistency of decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Angela, final questions, comments? Oh, sorry, Eugene.
No.
Did you want to respond to?
Yep. If you don't mind, just have two quick ones. When is the date of the board meeting? Yes, do you know?
I think it's Thursday next week.
Thursday next week.
Dates are blurring in my mind. Wednesday,
Okay.
Thursday next week.
Wednesday, Thursday's very soon. So look, I'd support a letter going from this committee. Waikato District Council will also send a letter of support, and maybe HCC might be able to as well, but I think the more support we could show, the better. We have invested heavily, especially HCC, so do that. And the other thing was, and I know that this is too short a notice because of the meeting next week and the decisions that will probably come out of that, but and it might be a question for Andy. We don't have representation on AT's Rail Transport Committee, Rail Committee. Is that something that could be looked at in the future if we continue to Huia? Possibly.
Oh, I think just from my perspective, and I mean, I'm happy to ask, and because I sit on the AT board as well, so happy to ask. But it's probably a conversation that goes on in behind. But certainly ask a question for you.
Yep. No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's the right thing or not, but just something to look at if we continue it.
Thank you. Angela, last one, because we do now need to move on to some other substantial items.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I'll try and be brief, but I doubt it. Yeah, what I'm hearing around the table is support, which is so encouraging with other voices locally that are out there at the moment. I think at the heart of this, we need to remember that this is a startup service. It's not the final product. You know, a lot of time, a lot of work has gone into getting to Huia where it is currently, which is meeting a need for commuters, for our accessibility community, for our people who are trying to better their lives in some way. I just had a couple of questions, Phil, around that independent review and the initial increases from the 14 fare box recovery % up to potential 21%. Just really wanted to highlight, you know, that national average is 11%, and we're already smashing that. And that's totally encouraging. What is not helpful is local voices who put information out there that is confusing, that is frankly bad maths, and confuses the matter when they should be an independent, non-partisan voice. They should be having informed debate, not having misinformation out there. So incredibly disappointing when you do look at the math that is being purported, and you said it yourself, Mayor Adrian, $540, that is completely untrue. Never have we said, take to Huia, ignore the expressway. It's not a competition between a train and the expressway. The train gives people options. I imagine if I had to commute up to Auckland every day of the week, I would be exhausted. Number one, your travel time is not guaranteed. It can take anywhere from an hour and a half up to 4 hours from what I've heard from people in the last couple of weeks. Te Huia does give that guaranteed arrival time, even with the delays in Auckland. So people love it. You can do your work on there. I've got friends who are lawyers up in Auckland. They live in Hamilton. They clear emails on the train so that when they get into the office, they can start their billables. Productivity, social connection, community is what the train provides. If we want to encourage individuality, take your one-person car on the expressway, if you're so privileged and elitist to be able to do that. His words, not mine. I really struggle with the lack of local support wider, which is why I'm so encouraged from around this table to hear that support from councils who've invested ratepayer money in the service, from central government who's invested in the service, between the fastest growing city, Hamilton, and our largest city, Auckland. It's fantastic. Now, the current government, you know, has put an emphasis on fare box recovery and finding other funding sources. However, for people to want to invest, we need that certainty. We're not going to get investment without certainty. So much uncertainty out there at the moment. We've heard this morning there's a limited bucket. It's growing smaller for public transport. On the other hand, we've got our climate goals that we need to meet. Can't meet that without investment. Yeah, we've got massive aspirations and massive plans of where this service could get to, but we just need it to continue. So, yeah. Just probably lastly, you know, we heard from Morris, our accessibility coordinator here at Regional Council at the last Regional Transport Committee, saying that the world had opened up for those people who've got genuinely no other interregional public transport option. yeah, I just really feel for those people who do honestly have no other choice. Yeah, we need a resilient transport network, and that is what our council has gone out with. Our long-term plan was all about resilience. And that means we give people options so they can make the choice. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, Angela.
Chair, at the risk of being annoying, I'm not used to the questions and debate kind of being together. Can I make a very short debate?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Liz was okay.
Okay, sorry,
In-
Liz was
in-
first. Short. Hamilton City Council fully backs Te Huia. We've invested in a station and we want to see it succeed. We're the fastest growing city, and most of the population over the next few decades will be within the Golden Triangle of Hamilton, Auckland and Tauranga, where we're seeing the most population growth in the city. We need to have transport options for people. We need people to be able to travel reliably, and it would be a massive loss to New Zealand Inc. if we were to lose Te Huia. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Liz.
Thought you're going to go longer, to be honest. Hey, look, I guess we've always looked at Te Huia as a regional opportunity, because even though we're sitting here well, I sit and represent Waipa, absolutely there are people in my district who benefit hugely from the service that's currently out there. So look, I just wanted to, you know, on behalf of our council, continue and show our support for the service. The trends are very, very encouraging, and you know, we've got to start somewhere. And with fast growing districts and cities, this would seem like we've made an extraordinary start. I've had a good read of the report. Like I say, the trends are very encouraging. You've had a number of, you know, the patronage has exceeded expectations. So why wouldn't we continue?
Okay, thanks, Liz. So I'll ask Dave, can you put up, Dave and I have just been doing a quick drafting for an additional resolution, and I'm happy to take comment on that. So obviously the first one's to receive the report, and then secondly, picking up the sentiment that a letter of support be drafted and sent to the Waka Kotahi / New Zealand Transport Agency Board from the subcommittee, and it's recommended that each future-proof partner also provides similar letters of support. And I'm looking for some advice from you, Jess. Do we need to make it clear, though, that any support is coming from members other than central government members, given all of those sensitivity issues? And okay, do you want that in the resolution? Just yeah. Yeah, or yes, I think that's probably the easiest, because there are other organisations and partners other than local government that could well want to provide support. Yeah. Just referencing Waka Kotahi, or do you want central government in a more generic way? Yeah.
We should.
Okay.
We probably should exclude Kiwi Rail from this as well, noting the abstention of Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail.
Yep. Well, I'm just wondering whether it's government / government agencies, and leave it there. Yes. Yeah. So are members happy with that?
I always prefer central government, just because we are local government.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Hey. Now, just before I ask for movers and seconders of that, in terms of those matters that Andy raised around looking for input and potentially support in terms of the Kiwi Rail capital plan and the whole notice of requirement process, which is an ordeal in itself. Just looking for do we need to specifically resolve on those, or if we note those in the minutes for staff to look at and pick up on, and if need be to come back to the subcommittee for any resolution. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, we'll note those matters then in the minutes, and then staff can look at those and come back with any particular options or approaches as part of those processes, because they are quite different in terms of what potentially might need to be done. Okay, so that's what we've got before us. So if I can have a mover and second. Thanks, Angela. A seconder for that. I'm looking at Maxine. Any further discussion on those? If not, I'll put those. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And obviously, I think, Jess, you mentioned the board meetings next week, so we'll need to get that through in a timely manner, and really leaving it to members around the table in terms of talking with your organisations in terms of those other letters of support. Okay. Just also acknowledge and thanks for the work done in terms of the review report, Phil and the team. Okay, now we'll move to our next item, 8.5, implementing the Metro Spatial Plan, bus rapid transport, proof of concept, and then we'll hear in terms of an update on the future development strategy, and then we'll take a short tea break. Just while I remember, nothing to do with this committee per se, but when we finish the workshop, if those members who are on the future-proof hearings panel can remain behind for a short... No. No, it's not the headmaster's office, because Robert and Linda would like to have a discussion with us. So that's Liz, Sarah, Angela, and myself. So please don't forget. Robert, how long, what are we talking, 10 minutes? Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so 8.5, welcome Phil. And in probably about half an hour, we'll see how we go. I'm just looking at agenda adjustments because we're a wee bit over time, but otherwise over to you. We've got your presentation before us and obviously highlighting the key matters that you want to highlight and engage with the committee on.
Okay, so just confirming you do want me to chop down on the amount of slides? That was my
well, we've got sort of about half an hour. We've got the slides in the pack. We've also got some other items we have to get through too. So that's why see how we go, and we can work through that. So certainly there's at least half an hour there.
So reporting back today on one of the, I think, flagship projects for the Metro Spatial Plan implementation, the Transport Programme business case we did a couple of years ago that we're obviously trying to move forward and actually develop some tangible projects. Obviously there's this piece of work, there's the PT Pathways project, which is about to commence. There's the freight logistics work, which we are probably a month, 6 weeks away from completing. And there's some funding and financing work around the potential to do more around BRT stations in the future, which again, these are all things I think need to come back to this committee for discussion. So I guess as well, I'm not going to get through with the presentation today, so just a bit of an happy to go out to any council alongside your officers to do this presentation like we did before, if councils would like that. Because obviously this is a transport working group piece, not Hamilton City Council. I just work for them. So I'll see how we go. I'll be saying turn slide Dave quite a lot. Sorry, Dave. Yeah. So just reminding you all of the actual task we had in hand in the 2022 programme business case came up with a concept bus rapid transit network. So this is our long-term aspiration for our core PT network, noting full well that projects like PT Pathways and the network reviews that Phil referred to earlier are that transitioning bus infrastructure planning type work that leads to this sort of bus rapid transit future. So we're planning for our future growth. This is our long-term planning. Next slide, please. Next slide. Very brief program there from the 2022 work that puts this BRT work in that longer term context. So that's 10 to 30 year rollout of this network. The next slide, just so quickly, bus rapid transit is that step change from the really good bus priority. It's that dedicated space. It's stations that look a bit like train stations, special vehicles, a new level of integrated ITS and service and operations. Next slide, please. Actually, we'll go to the next one. Again, just some pictures. We've done a lot of international benchmarking as part of this work. And we're coming up with a few cities that kind of match us in terms of what we can achieve, match us in terms of population, and there'll be a few slides later on in the presentation. But you just notice these things look a little bit different, that the buses are different, the stations are different. I guess the land use around them can be a bit different as well. So again, we're doing great things with buses in Hamilton and the sub-region right now. This is another step change going a little bit further. Next slide, please. These are just some potential stations as well. We've done a lot of technical work as part of this project that's been going on for over 6 months, and I'm very brief snapshot today of what we've done. But I like the photograph on the left is one that your officers really liked in terms of some of the potential infrastructure we could have on this network. So when we started thinking about what stations could look like, how they needed to function and how big they needed to be. So again, just to show that we've actually done quite a lot of work behind the scenes. And the next slide, picture, and the next slide, if you can go to Dave, please. So the difference between the slide on the opening page and this slide is that we've gone back and we've looked at that 2022 work. We've looked at the corridors that we came up with back then, and we've made a few changes. So the bigger change on this one is that we've gone for 2 eastern networks rather than the one that we originally had. The others remain pretty much as they were, noting that the southern alignment was always the hardest one to define given the Southern Links connotation, the growth of Peacock and that sort of thing. So what the big change here is basically the pink or purple, whatever it is, the eastern alignment going up towards the university from Ruakura, on Clyde Street, and the green eastern alignment, which was going all the way through to Ruakura, terminating at 5 Crossroads. And we can come back to this later on if you want. The next slide just shows a little bit more definition around some of the actual bus lines, what physically they could look like and how they'd actually operate. So we've got a 3-line focus, and remember, sorry, 4-line focus, and remember that all around this is a supporting bus network. So for the PT planners amongst us that really like this sort of thing, this just shows that core network. And if it's getting too boring, I can move on quickly. So if we go to the next slide, just to touch on the fact that we have started looking at some designs, how these would operate. We've used examples around the country to help us with this, particularly those in Auckland and the Eastern Busway. Next slide, please, Dave. Again, we've started looking at design standards. I guess the size of stations, where stations are, multifunctional ticketing facilities, information facilities, and just some basic dimensions around minimums, requirements for platforms and for widths and things like that. So if we go on to the next slide, we've actually started looking at more detail in those corridors as well. So if we focus here on the central city spine, we've actually identified some locations for 3 stations along Anglesey Street. The same for, if we go to the next slide, I'm going through this quite quickly, for the northern spine as well. So again, some of these are existing stops. Some of these are sort of where we see sort of major interchanges. There's a lot of potential for development around some of these locations. There is some science behind these, particularly around the spacing of these services and stations. We've done the same thing on the next slide for the 5 Crossroads corridor, and the next slide for Clyde Street as well. Does anyone want to pause there and talk about anything?
Any questions at the moment? No, carry on. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks. So a big part of this technical work was around the operational requirements. So what you're seeing here is very infrastructure related. We did take a look at how we would need to change the signal network in the city, how we'd need to modify intersections, facilities that the buses would need regarding layover and turnaround, depots, and obviously fitting into the ongoing work the Regional Council are looking around charging points and park and rides. Again, just on the next slide, please, Dave, and the one after, sorry. Just emphasising the colossal work that this actually is going forward. Again, we are talking long term here, but we are talking the need for a level of collaboration that even goes beyond the great technical collaboration we're doing now. So basically, to get this done, we will need to continue this really good collaborative technical approach that we're currently doing, particularly between the City Council and the Regional Council. On the next slide, please, Dave. So we've, again, part of the study looked at what sort of future vehicles we'd be looking at. Are we looking at EVs? Are we looking at hydrogen? Are we looking at other fuels? Are they going to be big enough? Are we going to need to plan for them long-term financially, which obviously we will do. And we're doing some further work to update the actual cost of these vehicles and the cost of the actual operations themselves. Next slide, please, Dave. And just some again, some more pictures around potential vehicles that have been used on similar projects globally, and just some more, I guess, in-depth, what does Hamilton need out of these vehicles? If we go to the next slide, again, it continues that thinking around the level of vehicles and the design we need based on that uptake of patronage. Again, we're talking about a 15, 30-year vision for this sort of thing. We need the current bus services to do the patronage development, increase the frequencies to get to that BRT future. And as that progresses, and we'll do it line by line, state of vehicles and the size of vehicles needs to change. Next slide, please, Dave. So what we tried to do as well with this work is start benchmarking it internationally. So we've looked at projects around the globe, including ones a little bit more local. And we have an organisation called the Institute for Transport Development and Policy, and they actually come up with I guess a ranking system that we can mark ourselves against. So it covers infrastructure, operations, the ability to transform local land use and things like that. And the current concept that we're presenting in this report does match up very nicely in terms of, if if we do it line by line, some of them will get that silver standard, some of them again will get that bronze standard, and again that's based on corridor constraints, the ability to put stations where we want to do, noting that we've got a whole lot of design work to do if this goes forward. So that's something we'll continue to do as the design process goes on. And again, on the next slide, please, Dave. Some of the other things that we measure ourselves on are, the communications and branding side of our new transport system, how easy it is to access that system, the standard of vehicles themselves, the ease of planning and the ability to transform that land use around, and the standard of infrastructure is obviously a big one. So again, it's taking the work from 2022 to that next level. Nearly finished. So the next slide just shows some international examples that we've looked at. So obviously, Auckland are in front of us in terms of their thinking, and that's particularly shown on the Eastern Busway. So again, we're just popping these in there because this is the sort of designs that we're having considered in terms of the way the stations look, in the way that the buses pull into the lay-by so that other buses can pass and those sorts of things. So it's just giving an idea that, it's other people are doing this, and in some areas it's actually being implemented. And the next slide shows one of my favourites. It's one in Denmark. It's a very recent one, and on both those slides, I do have a video attached that we don't have time to look at today, but I can circulate those if you want to. So if we go to the next slide, and I like the Nantes example because it's not far off population-wise with what we're dealing with around here. So whilst I love this picture in terms of the way the vehicle looks and I guess the dimensions, I think what that doesn't capture is some of the adjacent transformational land use that we can get and what we need out of BRT. But if you dig into Nantes as a project, and obviously we can't do that right now, there are a lot of similarities with what we're dealing with in this area, I think, to what they've done in France there. The other good one, which I haven't got a slide on, is Eugene in Origin, which the consultant team said is very similar to what we're doing here. So that sounds good. So just in terms of the final slide, the next steps really are, there's a considerable amount of technical work behind this, both from an operational level and from an infrastructure level. I'd say it's almost at a developed design stage. So there are some actual drawings behind this as well. We've started to look into some quite gnarly design challenges, but essentially we've set ourselves up now for almost moving into that detailed design space, which I know is what a lot of people want us to do. So obviously what happens next is clearly dependent on funding, but this is basically given us that further, I guess, operational and infrastructure understanding to show that we're not flogging a dead horse here. There really is that potential to do really good things with that future PT concept. So that's what we need to aim for. But the next 20 years, we've got to fill in the gaps. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So I'll open it up for comments and questions in terms of what's been presented. Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Yeah, I might take you up on your offer to just to bring other elected members up to speed as well, just from my council. Yeah, just all that stuff looks incredible. What's sort of I understand that's sort of the end goal, well, the 10, 20 years time.
Yeah.
What are the steps needed to get us there?
Yeah.
In the next 10 years?
Yeah, this is where those four projects that I mentioned earlier, they talk to each other. And again, I don't feel we've had the time really to talk about in this forum or any other forum. That's not a criticism, it's just the timings. The PT Pathways project, which Regional Council are leading and it's about to start, is going to take that from 2027, that integrated service, land use, and the ability to align with infrastructure, which is where Hamilton City comes in, route planning, combined with the network reviews that the Regional Council go through as part of their business as usual, the ability to be able to enhance or change, orbiters or find our next meteor promote our next road to Tuna Rocket. But generally the ethos that we had from the 2022 work was go hard on frequencies before infrastructure. And that is just, for me, solid transport planning, public transport coordination advice. So I think that's what we do. We keep going hard on the frequencies, build up that patronage, start seeing that transformational PT change. Don't forget the fact that we've got to link into a wider sub-regional network. Start getting our heads around what we're going to need in terms of vehicle requirements and how it's going to cost, so that we can all start getting into our long-term budgets. That's where, again, this work has done a lot of that behind the scenes. But really, we need to set the condition, and that condition is patronage by some really good, slick, more frequent networks. And again, I know we can't say it these days, but the walking and cycling networks behind all this, all related to our emissions reduction targets, which still exist in our business case, of course, are a big part of it as well. So that whole land use change patronage that we need to get to our BRT future we just can't stop the planning and implement as funding allows.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I always enjoy your updates. So yeah,
Thank you.
Other questions or comments of Phil? Carolyn?
Yeah, absolutely. If I may, there is a project on our list which is currently unfortunately unfunded, that we have developed with Shane and others to look at that very issue.
Liz?
Yeah, look, and just a comment, I guess this is probably all the fun stuff you get to do, right? Because looking through this report, this was really excites you about what the future looks like for the city. So look, for me, it was so inspiring watching this, reading this, and I guess watching now the progress that can hopefully be made over the next 10 or 20 years. I heard you say 10 years, so I suspect you're trying to make this progress a bit faster. But it is good, and it's exactly what the city needs, because we really want to make sure that mass transit features as a priority to ensure that the city does not get clogged up. And what's good for the city is good for the region. So yeah, thanks for this. I think it was a really inspiring report from my perspective.
Thank you. I needed that. Thank you.
Okay. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you, Phil, for the presentation. I got to have a preview of it, but it is really inspiring, and I look forward to our council being able to also view this as a whole as well. I googled Eugene, Oregon, and I think their population is almost identical to Hamilton. It's actually slightly smaller, at around 100,000. So that seems like a really useful example for us to look at, particularly also because I think in some ways maybe that city probably had some similar starting points around land use and other things too compared to us. Final comment is, we know frequency is what will get us there, and that has to be a really big focus in terms of services. What we're hearing from the GPS is doom and gloom for co-funding. So I guess my question is, how do we have some resilience in our plan going forward to ensure that we're not just spinning wheels for years because we're hamstrung by a lack of support from government? But it's a really easy question.
Well, I think if I may, and I don't want to speak out of line here, I think in the context of other projects, the ability for, I guess, the local councils, remember, we've been doing this for the last 18 months. These 4 projects have been going on without the ability of NZTA to support us. They have from a staff perspective, but not from a funding perspective. I know our draft LTPs do have some of that investigation money to continue. And again, I guess in the context of other projects, maybe there isn't actually great sums involved, so to do that. So I think if we can, I guess, manage to keep our planning momentum going forward, because this work, you know, we're going to grow. Our growth may ease off a little bit, so we still need to plan for things
in
when pick up.
terms of support, I guess what you're saying around the planning money that both our council and regional council have in their drafts, but I guess the question was more actually the increasing the frequency of the services that you know, transition to BRT, which you said was critical. Yeah, but at the same time, there's differing levels of ambition around that are problematic when it comes to getting subsidy.
My gut feel, Phil, would be that would be a core component of the PT Pathways project, being able to test those greater frequencies going forward.
Yeah, it would actually, very much so. So that's very much in scope of the PT Pathways work. We do, I mean, the low cost, low risk program of network investment service enhancements that we have developed and is in for NZTA subsidy consideration at the moment is actually quite significant. I mean, it's a very large program of new services and service enhancements, primarily in the MSP area. So we have a plan in place that's currently all subject to crowdfunding and local share funding. It's not that the vision has been there through the development of that package of work.
Yes, and actually our submission, I'm making sure our submission to your LTP says, yay, we're really excited about what you've actually got in your draft. Again, the problem is the co-funding, and we just, I guess my question was, how do we make progress if this round and then the next round deliver very little in terms of co-funding for improved services, or, you know, dare I say it, actually we end up with a reduction in what we've already got. So that's the question, is the government side of the funding. Can we explore other alternatives for funding where we're not fully reliant on them, or yeah, just finding some resilience to ensure that planning doesn't stop at planning.
Yeah,
I'll leave it there.
Well, I mean, we are doing that every day, to be honest, and we would continue to do that. And the work that the Transport Working Group does and the Future Proof team collectively does to guide all of us in that space is happening all of the time. So I don't think there's anything new in that. How packages of funding come together to deliver outcomes is going to continue after we have a sense of direction from the government in terms of their share. And I think there's a couple of slides later on in the day that I just want to touch on that will pick up aspects of that.
Yeah, Adrian.
Just a really brief comment. I guess the other challenge around this too is it's not just about putting in public transport, it's actually having the structures there that you can put it in. So you're planning, this is where the linkage is with the growth of the city, isn't it? Is that you have a vision that the developers can see what you've got planned as well. So I sort of see it as a two-pronged thing. It's one thing trying to fit buses into an existing infrastructure. You've got to plan ahead and make sure that that's part of the planning, so it's not just one silo.
Phil, did you want to?
No, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's happening right now. Yeah.
Anything further from members? No. So a couple of things. You were happy, Phil, I think, to circulate the video to members, to the committee. And obviously, Angela has suggested presentation to her council, so that offer's open to all people, partners around the table.
Absolutely, yeah. That's been a very big thing we've done as part of the Transport Working Group over the years. Happy to do that with my colleagues, of course. Can't do it all on my own. So.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So if I take us to page 81, there's a recommendation to receive the implementing the Metro Spatial Plan Bus Rapid Transport Proof of Concept report. So if I can have a mover and second. for that. Thanks, Maxine. Seconded by Sarah. If there's nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now, 8.6, the Future Development Strategy Update, and I think Miffy is online.
I am indeed.
Welcome,
Kia ora
Miffy.
tātou. Hello, everyone.
Over to you.
Kia ora, ko Miffy Foley tōku ingoa. I am the team leader of Strategic and Spatial Planning at the Waikato Regional Council, and I'm also the lead of the Policy and Planning Working Group for Future Proofs. So we are well on the way through the process of updating the future development strategy. As you may know, we did do a quite significant update to the future proof strategy in 2022. However, that didn't quite meet all the requirements under the National Policy Statement on Urban Development for a Future Development Strategy. And we also had Mana Marapiako join the partnership. So we needed to include them, weave them through the strategy, and also meet those additional requirements of a future development strategy. So the strategy went out for consultation earlier this year. There was a 5-week consultation period. We did have 38 submissions come in. 49 submissions come in, and 38 people initially wished to speak. We held hearings in March with 33 submitters coming to present to us. We have just had the deliberations this week, and we will be reporting those recommendations up to FPIC in June for them to hopefully endorse a final strategy to then be recommended to partners for adoption. So in terms of the submissions we received, there were a number of them that did submit on transport. There is a graph there in the report that gives you an overview of the themes that were raised. You can see that transport there was a bit of interest there. So there were some concerns about the ability of our network to cope with some of the growth areas, particularly Whangaroa Raglan. There was a lot of support for the rapid and frequent transport and increases in multimodal transport. And there was an interest in advancing Southern Links. So generally, we had good engagement from the development community, not so much from the community itself, but we are comfortable that we have a strategy that will take us forward the next few years until we have to prepare the next one. We are currently preparing the implementation plan, which will also go to the future development strategy, which will set out our work program for the next year. Any questions?
Thanks, Miffy. Any questions, comments around the table? No? Okay. It's been moved by Angela to receive the report, seconded by Eugene. If there's nothing further, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And thanks very much, Miffy, for the update.
Kia ora.
I was proposing we'd take a 10-minute break. We've got a workshop and probably another good half hour in terms of matters on the agenda. So that would then break 2:15. We'd finish by around 1:45. So we'll adjourn for 10 minutes and reconvene at 11:45.